Hello guys, and welcome to my Frost Mage Magicka Warden build. This thing hits like a truck, it's very tanky, it's very mobile, and it is a 100% Frost Mage build. It started as an RP build, but it turns out it's actually pretty OP. Pretty much an anti-Zerg spec. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so let's take a look at the build. So to begin, we are a Nord Warden. As I had just mentioned, this started off as a roleplay build, so for the purposes of roleplaying an Ice Mage, you definitely want to pick Nord. However, if you actually want to go for like a max stat on this build or the best race or whatever, I think that High Elf is going to be the best option, simply because High Elf is going to give you that max mag bonus, it's going to give you the mag recovery, and it's going to give you a little bit of elemental frost damage. Now, Nord itself is not a terrible option because you get the 6% damage reduction, which is really awesome because we are a vampire already. That being said, though, there's definitely better options out there for a Magicka build. My Warden is just a Nord. So let's take a look at the stats here. So taking a look at our Magicka pool, we see it coming in at 30k. If we had an ideal race, we'd be looking at around 32k on this build. Not a huge Magicka pool at all, which is kind of strange for a Magicka Warden. Usually they stack the max mag really well, and that's kind of the route you want to go for. But not on this build. You don't need the big Magicka pool. We're not using a damage shield on it, so we don't need the pool for the damage shield to scale. So there you go. 30k is plenty for this spec. Trust me, it might not look, the offensive stats here might not look too impressive, but they're very, very good on this build, and it's a big part of set synergy on this spec that makes it all work out. So our max health is coming in at 25.7k. This is a little bit higher than it would be if we were on a Magicka race that didn't give the HP bonus. This is great. You want to sit around 25k HP health on this build. It's fairly tanky, so 20k plus health works great, but 25k plus is just, you know, giving you more of a burst cushion, so it's going to be better and better. And then the max stam is very low, sitting at 11k. You don't need a huge stam pool on this build. We are running, like I said, dual frost staff, guys. We have frost staves on both bars, so that means that all of our blocking is going to cost Magicka and not stamina. So this means that we don't actually need a lot of stamina recovery, and we don't actually need a huge stamina pool, because we really circumvent spending a lot of stamina from our stam pool just due to running the staves. So there you go. Our Magicka recovery is coming in buffed. We'll buff up for you too. Buffed at 2,170. Stamina recovery coming in buffed at 800. Much more Magicka recovery. It's much more important for this build. The dual frost staff blocking, etc. The stam recovery, like I said, is low like the max stam because we are running the dual frost staff and we can actually get away with it on this spec. Our spell damage on this build is not half bad. We buff up the spell damage with the Betty Netch, 2,527, and we are running Torg's Pact infused on the back bar. So this gets buffed by another 600, so we sit around 3,100 to 3,200 spell damage on this build with the Torg's buff up, and that should be up almost all the time. So it's not actually that huge, hey? If we were playing a race that had a good Magicka pool as well, we'd have 32k Magicka and 3,200 spell damage, which doesn't seem that crazy, but like I said, guys, this Frost Mage build is all about really good set synergy, and that's how we get the build to hit so hard. So this is great base spell damage and max Magicka. It's pretty much going to provide you with the kind of bulk of your damage as well as the bulk of your healing as well. So the spell critical on the front bar is coming in at 45.6%. Not a crazy amount of spell crit. 45 is not bad. So that's where we're going to sit on this build. All right, our physical and our spell resist are coming in pretty sweet on this build. 21,000 spell resist and 18,000 crit physical resist. Not bad at all, honestly. For light armor build, we did go with a few CP to bulk up the physical resist just to help us out, but this is pretty sweet for buffed light armor. It's not too terrible. Crit resist coming in at 1,800. I do not have ideal traits on the gear. We would have a little bit more crit resist if I had some better gear traits. But ideally, I think you want to sit at about 2k on this spec. And then for the Munduses that we're using, guys, we are using the Atronach for that Magicka recovery. This is our base Magicka recovery here. We also have the Blue Betty, Blue Betty's going to be more Magicka recovery on top. And then we are a vampire. Vampire, very important for this build as we do use Mist form, so you definitely need to be vamp for it. And then we have Witch Mother's Potent Brew as our food. And this is going to be great just because it's going to bulk up our max Magicka, our Magicka recovery, and our max health, which is super awesome. Give us a little bit of burst resistance, a little bit more damage, and a little bit more sustain. For the potions you want to use on this spec, I would recommend going for the Essence of Health Tri-Stats. You can go with any potion that gives you max Magicka, though, as that's the primary resource you'll need. Essence of Health is just nice because it gives you a huge amount of sustain, but a max Magicka pot is totally viable, or any Magicka pot combination that you want to use as well. For the gear that we are using on this build, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing 100% frost damage on this build, and the gear is a big part of that too. So to begin, the first set that we have is Winterborn, and we're going to go through this set first because it is kind of the central piece of this build that makes the entire thing come together properly. So we get max Magicka, Magicka recovery, spell damage. When we deal damage with the cold ability, we have an 8% chance to summon an ice pillar, dealing 8k frost damage to all enemies in a 3-meter radius, and this will last for 2 seconds, and it snares for 60% on anyone that it hits. So this ability here, this set here is actually really good. If you compare this to a set like Valkynscoria, Winterborn is actually going to out-damage a set like Valkynscoria. But the big issue with a set like this is that there's very few access to like frost damage dealing abilities in the game outside of the Warden class. So the Warden is like the only class in the game that can really take advantage of a set like this. And that is why we're running it. We are seriously 100% frost damage. Every single attack that we do has a chance to proc Winterborn. So we're going to have a great uptime on our Winterborn procs, and they're going to deal a lot of damage on this build as well. The next set that we have, we're going to take a look at the Helm and Shoulder set, and this is Iceheart. Now, this is yet again another double whammy set for the Winterborn, just playing into that frost damage. When we deal critical damage, we have the 20% chance to summon the Iceheart damage shield, which will give us a 4k damage shield for 6 seconds, and while it holds, we deal 1k frost damage to all enemies within 5 meters every 1 second. So this is yet again frost damage that can proc our Winterborn. So these two sets are going to synergize really well again. And then on top of it, this damage shield is really good. This build uses Mist form, and the Iceheart damage shield you can actually activate while you're in Mist form. And a common thing that you'll do on this kind of build is throw down your fields just to kind of like keep your opponent slowed, and then maybe mist through them, etc. And what this is going to mean is that if anyone steps in your field and procs your Iceheart, the shield will appear over top your Mist form, and your Mist form will mitigate the shield as well. So the shield will have 75% damage reduction, just like Mist form does, and it essentially gives you a really tanky Mist. On top of that AoE that it gives, which is really nice, just tons of extra AoE frost damage to throw out with this build too. So the next set that we have, guys, and the final set for this build is Torug's Pact. And Torug's Pact was picked yet again for the ice stacking, and then on top of it, we get a little bit more burst from this. So I kind of had a few options here. This is the one set that you can change out if you don't want to run Torug's Pact. Maybe want to go for Necropotence or something for a little bit more max stat. That being said, though, Torug's Pact is so good on this build. So on our back bar, we of course have that infused weapon spell damage enchant, which is going to be great. It's going to buff up our weapon and spell damage, giving us 600 base spell damage. So we get a huge amount of spell damage from that. But the Ice Staff of Torug's Pact on the front bar, infused as well with that frost damage enchant. We're going to buff up with Minor Berserk so you guys can see the full enchant power. Almost 6.5k frost damage tooltip on that enchant. This frost damage enchant will yet again have a chance to proc Winterborn. It has a high chance to chill your opponent as well. So there you go, guys. This is going to be very, very, very deadly on the Winterborn build. And the big reason why I went with Torug's Pact to pair with this build is because it adds, it really reduces the cooldown on this frost damage enchant, which effectively means that single target wise, you'll be dealing way more damage than you would if you weren't running Torug's. And on top of it, your single target has a much higher chance of proccing Winterborn as well, due to that increased cooldown on the enchant, or the decreased cooldown, sorry. So for the weapons, guys, you definitely want to go both infused, and it is because we are running a Torug's Pact build, dual Torug's Pact on both bars, so infused is definitely the right call for this build. For the jewelry that we're running, we have full Swift on our jewelry, The Swift is very important. It's going to be really pivotal to your survival in PvP, having that movement speed, especially on a build like this, which is quite a good build against Zergs, to be honest. Like, this build does a great job of locking down groups of players and just allowing you to control your terrain and really control the fight, even if you're heavily outnumbered, and Swift is going to play into that. Swift, mixed with the amount of snares that you throw out, means that you are going to exponentially be the fastest thing that you're fighting in almost every situation on this build. You're going to be faster, and you're going to be slowing everything around you, so things are going to have a very hard time staying on top of you with the mix of the Swift and Snare combo on this spec. For the enchants, definitely full spell damage. We have great sustain on this build. You don't really need any more. If you are playing in the no CP campaign, go for maybe one sustain here as well for the magic recovery. Could come in handy. And then for the gear itself, guys, a mix of well-fitted and impenetrable, just like many of my Magicka builds. We are running the Frost Staff for the block. However, well-fitted just gives you more than the block passive does for the gear, or sorry, the block trait does for the gear. You get the reduced cost of roll, dodge, and sprint, which is kind of double dipping, whereas the block passive will not. So we get the block reduction from our Frost Staff as well as from our champion points. But from the gear itself, you definitely want to go full well-fitted for the dodge roll and the sprint. And yeah, there you go. I would say 4 well-fitted and 3 impenetrable for this build. I've got a few pieces of Divines on, 3 pieces here, and that's just simply because I myself didn't farm ideal traits for my Winterborn, so this is just what I had for this spec. And then for the enchants on the gear, I would highly recommend you do full max Magicka. You don't want to neglect your damage any more than you did, and you don't really need the max stam on this build. And we have quite a bit of max health already, so you can definitely go full max Magicka on this spec for the extra damage. That being said, if you want to go for the Hacky Joe, you can for the max health, but the max stam is not a necessity, so this is one of the few builds where I would say don't go for the Hacky Joe unless you really want it, but it's not a necessity at all. The build functions just fine without it. Alright, so let's take a look at the skills that we're using on the build. So we're going to start on our front bar, which is the bar with the frost damage enchant on it, not the bar with the weapon spell damage enchant. So this bar will deal more damage off our light and heavy attack weaves, just because we have Torx packed on it, which is super awesome. But let's take a look at these skills. We're going to buff up a little bit so you guys can get a little bit of the taste of the damage on this build. Force Pulse coming in as the first skill here, and this thing is just barely creeping over a 7.5k tooltip, so not a huge tooltip on the Force Pulse, but however, we're going to get huge damage from our Torx Pact as well as those Winterborn procs on our Force Pulse, so this will still hit really, really hard when we get the full combo off, so don't worry, it's still going to do a lot of damage. This is going to be your primary single target spammable. For the most part, whenever you have someone fully dotted up in your fields, this is what you're going to use to take them down. Force Pulse, nice and snappy cancel on it too. Very good skill for this build. The next skill that we have is Frost Reach, still playing into that frost damage. Now, the Frost Reach is nice because it does deal the upfront frost damage, but that damage over time is what's really sweet about it, because it's not a huge dot. However, it will just give your opponent a higher chance to take a Winterborn proc, which is exactly what we want on this build, is to stack as much frost damage as possible. The Frost Reach will also immobilize a target for 4 seconds. We have tons of access to immobilize on this build. This is the only skill that will directly immobilize an opponent off your attack. However, if you throw down your frost fields and you hit your opponent with some frost attacks inside these fields, they become immobilized. So we have a lot of immobilize on this build, single target AoE, and this is just going to be access to one of them here. The next skill that we have is Bird of Prey. This is going to be our minor berserk buff. Very important for our outgoing damage because this will buff all of our outgoing damages. Our Winterborn set will hit harder, our enchants will hit harder, and our Iceheart set will hit harder as well from minor berserk. So this is very important for this build that we run this buff. It also gives us the Major Expedition, which is the only access we have to it outside of canceling Mist. So it's a great access to speed on this build as well, pairing really nice with the Swifty. The next skill that we have is Inner Light. This is slotted for passive purposes. We get that 10% spell crit, which is awesome, and a 5% plus the 2% for Mage's Guild, so 7% total bonus to our max Magicka for slotting this ability here as well. So yep, you definitely just want to slot this for passive purposes. You will not even use this as a stealth detect. This build has so much AoE frost damage. You're better off just trapping a stealth player in your frost fields than trying to pull them out of stealth with Inner Light. So it's pretty much entirely a passive slot here just to keep our front bar doing a little bit more damage and critting more often. And then finally, guys, we have Living Trellis as literally our only heal on the build. We're running dual Frost Staff. We actually don't need more than just one heal if we have such a powerful block on both our bars. So Living Trellis is a great heal for a few reasons, and this patch, with how heavy everyone's going into damage over time, I cannot stress enough how awesome a heal like Living Trellis is for a patch like this. So let's take a look at it. For 10 seconds when you use this ability, whenever you take damage, you'll heal yourself for 2,100 health each time you take damage, and that will occur every 1 second. So if you take a look at this and you maybe compare this to a damage over time or a dot effect, this essentially negates dots. You know, if you have a dot on you and you use your Living Trellis, no dot in the game is going to deal 2k damage a second to you, so you're going to out-heal that dot. Things like Slowed Semblance. I mean, sets like that, we would literally need 3 stacks of Slows on us in order for Slows to even start doing damage if we're using this heal. That's how good this ability is for anti-damage over time. It is such a good anti-damage over time heal. And then on top of it, when we reactivate the heal or it expires, we gain that additional burst healing as well. And that burst comes in real handy because it turns this really good anti-dot heal into a good burst heal as well. Mixed it in with our block, and yeah, we actually have a pretty insane amount of healing power. You guys saw it in the footage. Our ability to tank with just the Living Trellis is pretty insane. Now, something that I do want to mention is that Living Trellis by itself is not going to be your end-all be-all to anti-dot, but what you can do to really counter dots hard on this build is go for the Living Trellis, and then on your back bar we have the Betty Netch. And when you use the Netch, it removes 1 negative effect from yourself. It is entirely free to cast, and casting this ability heals you for about 1k because it is an animal companion pet as well. So there you go. What you're going to do is go for the Leeching Vines and into the Betty Netch, and essentially the dots that hit you are going to heal you, and the Betty Netch is just going to pull 1 negative effect at a time off of you. And this is a really, really good combination for this build because we have a real easy time breaking line of sight. We can easily snare a lot of opponents, break some line of sight, go for the things like our heals, and then Betty Netch around the corner like that, and people are going to take their time to get down to us because of how much snare and speed we have. So there you go. This build, in all honesty, hard counters dots pretty well. I would go as far to say that this build almost hard counters dots as well as a Templar can. It's less resource intensive for us to counter dots than it is for a Templar. However, the Templar is going to have more hard dot counter because they'll be able to remove more negative effects quickly at that increased cost. So honestly, having played in the dot meta right now, I feel like a build or a defensive setup like this is really, really good. I have been absolutely slaying people running the slowed set with this build, and it's because of how anti-dot these heals in conjunction are. Anyway, let's take a look at the ultimate on our Frost Staff bar, on our damage bar, sorry. We have Permafrost. Now, I didn't go with Northern Storm here, and there's a big reason why I didn't pick the Northern Storm. We do get that 8% max Magicka, which is really nice, and it would increase our damage. However, we're not a huge max Magicka damage spec anyway, so we don't give up a huge amount of damage not going for this morph. The big advantage of Permafrost is that it is the only frost damage ability in the game that stuns, and we are playing a 100% frost mage. Now, you'd think that we would really need a stun for a build like this, but because we have so much snare and immobilize potential, honestly, against most things, you don't need the stun unless they start to get really tanky or they're very good players and hard to take down, and then you use Permafrost inside of your fields. And yeah, that's the end all be all. Almost nothing is going to survive the Permafrost stun if they get trapped in it inside your fields. It's pretty much a death sentence. It's so powerful. On top of it, due to the removal of AoE caps, Permafrost is like probably the best 1vx Zerg ultimate that you can use on a Warden, simply because when people jump on top of you, it's going to stun them, AoE stun everyone around you, and just that stun alone is going to buy you a lot of respite on top of the snare and damage. Yeah. Really, really good ultimate. So I would highly recommend going for Permafrost on this build, not Northern Storm. Don't try to play that Max Magicka game. I know it's tempting. I tried the Northern Storm ult, and Permafrost outperformed it by a long shot. It is a much better ult for this build than Northern Storm. All right, so let's take a look at our back bar. So our back bar is going to be kind of our support bar. We're going to do our movement and stuff. We're going to do some of our buffs on this back bar. And on top of it, we're going to have our AoE fields here as well. And yeah, so let's start off. The first AoE field that we have is Blockade of Frost. This is the larger morph of this ability to give it more radius. Just so we can cover a larger area with it. Definitely the best morph for PvP. We get that beautiful almost 2k frost damage. We'll buff up. I think it's 2k frost damage. Yep. 2k frost damage every 1 second. Reduce the movement speed of the opponent by 60% while they're in it. A chilled enemy becomes frozen and immobilized for 4 seconds if they are chilled in this field. So there you go, guys. This is going to be, like I said, huge access to AoE snares. We've got a lot of frost damage abilities that will easily set people into chilled status, that will easily set them into immobilized once they sit in this field. Very, very powerful AoE for this build. This is going to be your primary AoE snare, so there you go. The next AoE that we have is Winter's Revenge. This has a little bit better tooltip than the other one. It deals slightly more damage and lasts slightly longer. It's a little bit smaller than the other AoE Frost that we have. Now, the big advantage of Winter's Revenge, of course, is that you can cast it at a distance. You don't need to throw it at your feet like the other one there. So Winter's Revenge is really nice because it allows you to essentially preemptively put a frost field down in whatever you want to hold, get to that location, and then maybe throw your Blockade of Frost on top of it, and then you've got a nice strong field to just kind of sit in and hold there. But anyway, Winter's Revenge, yeah, really good ability. You're going to stack this with your Blockade of Frost, and these two are going to chew through people's defenses. Huge chance to proc that Winterborn set. You get your Ice Heart going off in it too. Yeah, super brutal, super brutal. These two AoEs, man, I don't know. This is just like anti-Zerg, these two skills here. Super anti-Zerg. All right, the next skill that we have is Elusive Mist. This is very important for the build. It's going to give us that huge 75% damage reduction. So between Mist and Block, we have huge amounts of damage mitigation on this build and real easy access to them. However, they all cut off our Magicka recovery, so that's something we have to keep conscientious of, is that when we're doing these hard defense, we'll blow through our Magicka quickly, so you kind of have to be aware of when you're using these kinds of defenses and not. Mist form, for the most part, is going to be access to very reliable movement that people are going to have a tough time killing you when you're using it. You become immune to all disabling and immobilization effects. Yeah. This is really awesome. Now, the 30% movement speed we get, that stacks with the Swifty. So if we had Gold Swifty, we'd be sitting at 60% increased movement speed on our Mist form. Very, very, very nice. I can't stress this enough. This is such a good ability in PvP with the Swifty trait. This is just, yeah, movement PvP is so good with Mist. I don't even know what to say. It's absolutely fantastic. Mist form is also nice because if you're taking a ton of dot damage and it's a little bit too much for your vines, you can always go into Mist to kind of suppress those dots so they deal less damage to you as well. And that goes for all incoming damage. You can suppress incoming burst with Mist too. But you do have a really good block, so that's usually the first option for suppressing the burst, as blocking one attack would be a little cheaper than using the Mist. Okay, the next ability we have is Blue Betty. We talked about this a little bit because it removes the one negative effect. Paired with our Leeching Vines, that is a really great combination. But Blue Betty is also going to be access to Major Sorcery for that 20% spell damage, which is nice. And it's going to give us 4k Magicka back over the 27 seconds while it's active. And it just gives us a little bit Magicka back each second. So this is really nice. It's a really good access to a little bit more Magicka recovery. And the nice part about Blue Betty is that we can continue to gain Magicka while we're in Mist or while we're blocking. If you look here, we are holding block and we're going to gain the Blue Betty Magicka still. And even in Mist form, it's a little visual error. The tether goes away, but you can still see my Magicka going up when I'm in Mist too. So Blue Betty is just kind of access to Magicka recovery in those times especially where we don't have the Magicka recovery as well. And then finally, guys, Ice Fortress is our final normal skill here. This is going to be access to both our Major Resolve and Major Ward for that physical spell resistance buffs and minor protection. Super great defensive buff for the Warden. Pop this once every 24 seconds, and that's pretty much all we're going to do with this skill. And then on the ultimate on this build, I have Ice Storm. Now, because we have Permafrost, which is very similar to the Eye of the Storm morph, you definitely want to go with Icy Rage on this morph here. The big advantage of using Icy Rage over Permafrost is that it's going to deal more damage than Permafrost, and it's going to immobilize right off the bat. Permafrost does stun, but if you're fighting a massive, like if you're going to drop an alt or something on like 20 plus players, I would say probably go for the Icy Rage. The Immobilize is just going to, I think, lock more people in the damage than the Permafrost will, because they'll move around. You won't get as many stunned with the Permafrost, I think, as you could potentially Immobilize and lock down with the Icy Rage. Not to mention, Icy Rage deals more damage. So if you're doing a huge bomb, go for the Icy Rage, but outside of that, you almost always want to use the Permafrost alt because it is going to be better in most situations. Alright guys, and finally we're going to take a peek at the champion points for this build. Starting off in the tower tree, we've got 1 Siphoner, 18 Warlord, and 16 in Sprinter. You've got to break free, you've got to sprint, and this is just my leftover point. In the Lover tree, we've got 64 Arcanist, 47 Mooncalf, and 11 in Tenacity. A few more points in Mooncalf than I really need. However, we really wanted that Windrunning passive, so that's why we put so many there. Windrunning, nice for that movement speed bonus and the 10% Magicka recovery while we sprint. We have a good sprint on this build, so it's definitely viable for this passive. But yeah, focus, of course, on Magicka recovery, and then some stam as well. A little bit in heavy attacks. If you guys want, you can take like 10, 15 points out of Mooncalf, put them in Tenacity for that stam sustain, or that mag sustain, if you feel like you don't need the stam. And then in the Shadow Tree, we've got 56 in Tumbling and 37 Shadow Ward. Big focus on Tumbling. Like I said, the reason we focus so much on the roll dodge aspect is because a lot of our block comes from the Frost Staff passives themselves for that bonus blocking. So we don't really need to dump a lot of CP into it. We do need to focus on Tumbling though, because we don't have medium armor. We are in light. So that is why we've gone with Tumbling here. And then Shadow Ward, just a few points here. Not as much as Tumbling, but like I said, we do want a few points for the block too. And then in the Apprentice Tree, taking a look at the offensive stats, 49 Elemental, 42 Spell Erosion, and 20 in Spell Critical, 19 in Blessed for some healing. Big focus on the penetration and the elemental flat damage increase, simply because this is going to increase all outgoing damage, including our Winterborn, including our Torix Pact, and including our Ice Heart sets. The Elfborn will only affect our Torix Pact and our abilities that we use, as well as our healing, so not a huge focus on Elfborn here, but we didn't want to neglect it too much because it does the crit healing as well, which is pretty sweet. In the Atronach Tree, we've got 81 Master at Arms and 39 Staff Expert. Almost every ability this build uses is affected by Master at Arms, including the sets that we use, the Ice Heart, Winterborn, Torix Pact. So you definitely want to go 81 Master at Arms. This is by far the most important champion tree to fill out for at first on this build, because it's going to give you the most amount of damage by a long shot. And then 39 Staff Expert for that light and heavy increased damage, which is really nice. We are rocking dual Frost Staff, so we get a lot out of that. And then finally, we get access to that Tactician passive. This is our only other stun outside of our Frost Ultimate, and this is just going to be if we roll someone's attack, hit them with the partial charged heavy or a fully charged heavy, and it's just going to stun them because they're set off balance. So that's pretty sweet. Gives us access to a nice stun there. Let's move on. Nothing in the Ritual Tree. In the Steed Tree, we have got 56 Ironclad and 54 Resistant. Ironclad, of course, is going to be the direct counter to incoming direct damage, so you want to put quite a few points in here. And then Resistant is going to be the bulking up of our critical resistance as well. If we had a little bit more Impenetrable on, we would have better crit resist, like I said earlier, but you don't need to put more than about 50 or so points into these guys here. And then in the Lady Tree, 23 Hardy, 23 Elemental, and 26 Thick Skin. We've got a little bit more into the dots because it is such a dot-heavy patch. If you're playing this in a meta that's not so dot-heavy, then maybe don't put so much in Thick Skin. We have good anti-dot counter, but at the same time, our anti-dot, a big part of it is we're still taking the dot damage. We're not just purging it right away, but we're using that damage to heal ourselves, essentially. So we do want to have some points in Thick Skin for this build still. And then 19 in Light Armor Focus. Like I had mentioned, this is going to give us a nice little bulk to our physical resistance because we are playing 5 light, and we have low physical resist in general. And then in the Lord Tree, guys, we have 49 in Quick Recovery for that increased healing. And that is the build, guys. There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so let's do some of that PvP commentary. To start off, we're just going to throw a bunch of ice fields down on these guys as they ride by on their horses, trying to get some people to fight here. This build is really good against a lot of players, honestly. The fact that we have so much zone control and so much movement speed, and we are quite tanky with our block, it means that we're actually like very well built to take on more than a single player. And yeah, you guys will see it here. We throw down the fields, we snare everybody in it. It allows us to easily get by ourselves behind these rocks with nobody on us, and then we can easily reset our fields. So by the time these guys are on top of us again, we already have our field set down, and we're already ready for them. And here you can see there, we literally get the immobilize on every single player. All three of them get immobilized. The one guy just gets stuck at the top there. He's not going to roll it to break out. He's just going to wait out the immobilize. So that's going to be great. If this guy's waiting out the immobilize, it means he is guaranteed going to be trapped in this fight. That DK is he's got like 60k HP, so he's going to be very tanky, but essentially we've made him almost useless if he can't use his debuffs, etc., because we keep him held still the whole time. We go into the permafrost here, get a great stun off on this other Nightblade that jumps in. The friendly Warden also jumped in here. There you see he goes for the Dawnbreaker too, but these guys are pounding heals on each other, doing a great job of keeping each other alive. We also have the very high HP player going for the protection ability there to keep that Nightblade from dying even more. But we're just going to keep snaring them. Look at how hard we keep this group locked down. Me and this other Warden are essentially just rotating around these guys and continuing to keep them stuck in the fields. And yeah, you can really see the superior movement here. I mean, we're at a huge advantage. This is a 2-on-2 at the moment, but if more players show up, if they show up on the enemy team, me and the other EP player can easily escape, but if more EP players show up, these guys are stuck in place, and it's essentially a death sentence if you catch people out in the open with these snares, because they'll just get rolled by the next Zerg that comes by. They'll have a really tough time getting away. But there you can see we go into yet another permafrost, trying to get that big stun off. The DK actually went and rezzed one of the players. Oh no, sorry, it was reinforcements. Reinforcements have arrived. So we're going to continue to fight these guys. We've got 4 in the field now, and I've got very low Magicka. So I'm just going to kite quickly behind these rocks here, throw down a couple blue betties, and then pull out a quick heavy attack. Something that I want to note about my Magicka recovery is that it's much better when I keep my vines up. We were very, very offensive there as we had those guys essentially locked down, so I didn't have my vines up. But as you can see, with the vines up here, my Magicka recovery shoots up way faster than without them. So it's very important, even if you're on the offensive on this build, to kind of keep your vines up. That is a huge mistake in my gameplay that I noticed, especially early on. As I played this build a bit more, I got better at keeping the vines up. But definitely keep your vines up. Not only do they make you really tanky, but the resource sustain they give you is well worthwhile as well. But as you can see here, we're just going to keep the frost fields down on that tight little choke, make it very hard for these guys to effectively swarm us. Just by keeping them continuously snared and split. We get a great immobilize off on this guy here into the Ice Storm ultimate. Great stun, a little bit of a poke there to finish him off. Just a super fantastic kill, kind of risked it for the biscuit. And there you see the leeching vines into the blue Betty, and we successfully get away from all those huge dots. I think we had a Slodes dot, some Poisons dots on us. Purge all of it as we run around the corner after the snare, and these guys are all still stuck in the middle of this field. They are all still stuck here. This is the beauty of this build, is that we lock these people down so hard on it. And here you see we do it yet again, the leeching vines into the blue Betty as we kite around the side of the rocks. And we gain Magicka kiting away here and manage to purge off all the negative effects. I go for another snare field inside of the rocks here. I like this tight choke here. And my goal is to kind of get into my Frost ultimate. And hopefully we can take a good stun, maybe if we get a good Dawnbreaker from the fellow Warden. Unfortunately, I take a bad stun there, go into my Frost ult. What I should have done is misted right away out of there instead of staying, but I was hoping to get maybe a Frost ult stun off. Probably should have just gone into Mist anyway. End up taking the death, but there you guys see the control on this build. So let's move on to the next clip. So here we are just in stealth outside a keep here that DC is attacking. They just want to take back one of their home keeps, but we're going to try to prevent that from happening. Go for a quick gank on the lower level player there, just a few force pulses to take him down and the immobilize. Really nice attack there, and huge damage. There you really see the Torix pack damage. That guy got nuked pretty quick. We're just going to kite behind these rocks, go into the blue Betty, go into the vines, and then what I should have done is maybe gone for a couple more blue Betties here, but that's all right. This clip here is like one of the first fights I had on this build. So what you will notice in this particular clip is that I do not use the vines well yet again, but you guys will see much better vine usage in the third clip we have on this as well. So there you see we just quickly nuke down the other player there. Huge crits with our Torg's Pact Enchant actually. This guy jumps on top of us, decides to back off like right away. I think just because of the snares. We're not putting like too terribly much damage into him. We just kept him kind of snared, and I think he decided he didn't want to sit in that. And yeah, there he goes running off. So we're just gonna sit here, spam Blue Betty for a while, wait for some more blue players to come. The blue player comes around the corner. We throw our fields down and get a great immobilize into the... Oh my god, that guy just melted. He didn't even get to the stun in the permafrost. We just absolutely nuked him. We go for the permafrost here. We get the stun on the non-tanky player. I quickly turn around and pop him with the force pulse and take him down as well. There you see just the power of that permafrost and the AoE. If something gets trapped in it, they either have to be very tanky or they are in big trouble. And yeah, that guy was not tanky, so he didn't survive. The tank did, however. We're going to keep our frost fields down here. Mad Shadowman's just kind of fencing with these guys in this spot here. If we keep the frost fields down, it gives him the support he needs to essentially survive it. And then we just put some more pepper into this guy here. He comes up here. He's very tanky. He gets me with the Meridia's Blessed Blind, so I decide to just quit attacking him because I'm not going to be able to hurt him for 5 seconds or so. Do a little bit of kiting, but don't end up moving too terribly much. See a larger group of DC coming this way. In this clip, I actually ran out of potions, so I popped the invisibility pot for lack of having a better potion. If we had had the tri-stat, we'd be looking at almost like half to full resources on Magicka, so that would have been nice, but that's all right. We did manage to kite it out and escape anyway, but nope, no we didn't. Here we go, another Nightblade jumps on top of us. We put some pepper into him, go into the ultimate, dodge roll his attack, get him with a great stun on the ultimate, and bring him down there. But we've still got a lot of pressure coming from some other blues. You saw a few arrows coming in, some fireballs, so we're gonna have to be careful to avoid that. And there's just more and more Nightblades here. Oh my gosh. So we try to do a kite there. I try to make the jump in that gap there. Zenimax doesn't let me. And then here I take a bad stun. Definitely should have held block there. We would have definitely survived, but that bad stun led to me taking a lot more damage than I had to. But there you see it. Like that was, I think, just showing a little bit of my inexperience on the build for like one of my first times playing it. But if we had made some better decisions, we definitely could have kept that fight going for sure. So let's move on to clip number 3. And I think this is arguably the one where I play this build probably the most effectively. That being said, though, I'm still kind of learning. This is a weird spec for me, too. I had a lot of fun playing it because it was so weird. But here you see me in an engagement with another Ice Warden. This guy, unfortunately, not rocking the full Ice build, just going for the Immobilize itself. He goes into his Permafrost, gets a nice stun off on me, and I take a few snipes from the wall, so I decide, okay, time to back off. Just don't want to take those unnecessary snipes, and then maybe some big bursts from the Warden would be really bad. So I back up a little bit, and another Warden jumps down as well, a Stamden, and he just comes pressure into me. I quickly go into my Permafrost here, and I put a ton of damage into him. Definitely would have killed him, but the other Warden's also throwing him a lot of heals at the time there too. So we get him really close, like 1%. Don't manage to take him down. We're just going to do another kite here because there's more AD players coming. As you can see, there's about 4 coming up there. We've got a Nightblade on us now. We just kind of hold him off, hold the block there just to kind of mitigate the damage, keep the fields down so everyone gets snared, takes a little bit of damage, and then we go for the vines into the Blue Betty, kite around the rocks, purge everything off of us, and here we come nice and fresh, and we hit these guys from behind. Huge burst on that guy there with the Torg's Enchant, and he rolls off the edge for the death, so we managed to take him down. And what we're going to do is push down into this gap here. The EP player ahead of us goes down, and yeah, here you kind of get to see just that tank. We're going to use a lot of roll dodge, a lot of block, and a lot of mist, and people are going to have a tough time kind of dealing with us here. So it's really great. This Stamsork here is kind of staying on top of us. We just throw our fields down to push him off the rocks, and now AD is kind of putting a lot of pressure on my Sork friend here. I go into my Permafrost, have my fields down. We're going to put a lot of damage into this guy here, but nope, Earthgore at the last second coming in with the save. So we don't manage to finish him off either, but that's okay. We did a great job just kind of holding the group there, and we're going to reposition on the top here to see what we can do. So there you go. The yellow group comes up. we catch him in the snares, make sure we put a little bit of damage with the immobilize into it. I jump off the edge, make sure to go for that leeching vines, and then we're just going to spam the Betty Netch a few times, remove those extra dots, and there you see we are fully purged. We've got our leeching vines up for another heal too, right back up to full health. A little bit low on Magicka, but we got a pot coming up, so I'm not too concerned. This Sork here is still staying on top of us. We put a little bit of pepper into this guy, but we had a bit of fights with him earlier, and he plays Stam Sork really, really well, and it's tough to bring him down on this build outside of my permafrost, so I just kind of going to keep him snared and hope that the Sork on my team, Malleus, can get a good kill. But he kites out a bit and then ends up just running off, and I decide not to chase, focusing, of course, on the larger group here. We've got our little bit of respite, a bit of resource back, and now we're going to engage with this AD group. We throw our snares down, go into the permafrost. Here you see we catch every single one of them almost with a really nice stun. Drop one player there to quite low HP. Managed to put a lot of burst into her. We have to go into Mist while we're in our permafrost because we're actually taking a lot of damage from these guys. So to mitigate the damage, we make sure we stay in Mist form so we don't get killed through our permafrost. And then we're just going to kite these guys, and here's just really good kite gameplay. You see we trap the guys in the corner there, rotate around the top here, and we're just going to drop down yet again on the same corner. Well, that was kind of the goal. But you saw like the good kite game. We held them down, locked them, got caught by some blues, and just take kind of a bad roll off the edge there. But yeah, that's kind of exactly what you want to do kite-wise with this build, is just lock people in the tighter spots using your immobilizes, etc. And there you go, guys. For the last few clips, we, of course, have some burst montage. I know you guys love to see the Warden just wrecking stuff. Here's a little bit of a similar fight on the same resource there with that Sork, where we just kind of hit the resource and absolutely crush these guys on the resource. Oh, my gosh. So much AoE damage. It's a lot to deal with. It's hard for anything that's roly-poly to kind of escape that. Really nice crush there. Something I did want to say is that this build is really great in these larger Zerg v Zerg combat. It actually has a ton of viability in organized raid combat. And yeah, this clip here I think is a really great example of what you can do on this build, even against organized raids. Here you can see we have the 20-man plus raid ahead of us there. We've got Siege from the Keep, which is great. That's what we're going to use to help increase our damage, and we are going to Frost Mage these fools. They come charging forward. We go into our permafrost, get huge amounts of stuns here. We've got all our snare fields down, and look at this. Organized raid actually held in place by the Frost Mage. Of course, we got some help. We had a Bomber jump in there too, and we had a Sork drop a negate. So we had quite a bit of extra help as well, but yeah, the Frost Mage definitely the crux of that, allowing that entire combo to work. They get bombarded by the Siege after being stuck in place for a while, and we actually force this group away, which is really sweet. I don't know. I don't play a lot of builds that have that kind of viability, so it's really cool for me to have that. Here you can see yet again, we're going to do another Frost Mage bomb. We go into the permafrost. We've got them in our frost fields. 1 kill, 2 kill. Down comes the negate. We roll through it. Negate ain't going to stop us. There's the next kill. Ladies and gentlemen, very nice. And then we actually roll back through the negate. Maybe not the best bet. These guys Zerg train us pretty good after anyway. There you go. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. And yeah, I play live on Twitch, so if you guys want to catch me for some live gameplay when I'm putting these builds together and trying them out, check out my Twitch channel. I try to stream every day, so check that out. And finally, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They are a VPN for gamers. So if you guys get crap ping to your favorite games like ESO, I'd check it out. They are a local Canadian company. I get 50 better ping on average to ESO because of them. And yeah, I've really enjoyed using them. I'd implore you guys to check them out. They are absolutely free to try. No credit card, no nothing, from the link in the description below. So you guys can check that out. And I hope you enjoyed that last little bomb there. There you see it yet again. We hold the group in place, and they take a huge amount of damage. Hope you guys enjoyed the build. Have a great night. Thank you so much for tuning in again, and I will see you next time.